Welcome back to the channel. We are back in the garage once again to finish up what we were working on the other day. We are going to be tackling the rear control arm mod. We are going to be trying to get as much as we can out of the stock rear suspension as we can with zero or little cost. So what we're going to start out with, we got to do some measurements before we try and pull anything apart or cut anything or modify any of the parts. So I just have a couple of things written down here. So I got driver side, passenger side as it sits in here. So right here, driver side, passenger side. You turn back to the whiteboard, driver side, passenger side. We're actually going to take the carpenter square and we're going to set it on the ground just like so, because this is going to be a kind of a reference points of where we are right now. So I have like a lot of camber in the front, right? The rear is a lot closer to zero. I want to say we're at like 1.5 degrees of camber in the rear. We want to get that as close to zero as we can. That's going to save tire life and add grip to the car, especially in the corners. So that being said, we're going to pull some measurements real quick. I'll show you that. Then we'll get them written down on the whiteboard up here for what the camber is currently based off of measurement off the ground. Again, we're all shooting for goals right now. It's just a goal of zero, goal of 1/4 inch, goal of zero, right? With the overall goal of being faster and a lot more aggressive in the chase. All right, so I got a marker. We're just gonna either write this on the concrete or on the side of the wall right here. So basically what we're gonna do, go in the center of the wheel, which is gonna be a little tricky because my square is hitting my fender before it's touching the bottom of the tire. Well, I can take a measurement off the bottom and just have kind of two reference points. How about that? I got about a 1/16 of an inch on the bottom, and then I have a 1/2 inch up top. So that's a 1/16 difference on that, 7/16. For total camber is going by inches instead of degrees. After measuring both sides, we have about a 1/2 inch of camber on both sides empty. Now we're going to load it up with a bunch of weight and pull another measurement to see where it's at. I'm not sure if it's going to be enough. So again, it doesn't look like it's really squatted down much, so I'm just trying to replicate the squat of the car in drift, but it's so hard to do that because there's not the body weight rolling on it, the car's not accelerating, there's no torque of the engine. But we'll at least try and push a little bit more weight on here and see if we can get an accurate reading. So yeah. All right, so I think we're gonna call it good with trying to put a bunch of weight on the back. Air compressor, extra parts, jack stands, full can of gas, 4 mounted tires, 4 not mounted tires, trunk full of tools and blocks of wood. If you look at it from the side now, it does look like it's squatted down quite a bit. It still maybe isn't as much as it would be in drift, but at least we have a general idea of what it could look like when it's squatted, so we can get some good reference numbers off of it. Hopefully you guys get the idea of what I'm trying to do. Empty, we had 1/2 inch between the carpenter square and the top of the tire. Loaded 3/4 of an inch, which means there's a 1/4 inch added camber under load. So we want to try and get that out of there. It already wears when you go down the road just normally. When you're drifting, that's even more camber, throwing more tire wear at the inside edge of your tire. It is now day 2 working on the rear control arm mod. I got everything back off the car so it's not all loaded down. We're gonna start off with the driver's side upper control arm. Just pull off one side at a time, take some measurements, see where I can or should or shouldn't be cutting to make sure that I can re-weld it back together after it's cut. Something else to note with the upper control arm, there is no eccentric bolts or anything like that, so I don't have to worry about making any marks or ensuring that my alignment goes back the same, because that's all on the lower control arm, not the upper. So right here, it's just one bolt on the knuckle, and then there's a bolt in the front and the back. There it is. Just this nice little tiny wishbone. All dirty and caked with mud. So we got this thing out. I just kind of scraped it off a little bit. There's a little bit of surface rust down here because it's 25 years old. I'm thinking it's gonna be somewhere right in the middle, and then instead of using like pieces of plate, I have some like drop tubing and stuff that I can maybe cut a chunk off of here. It's 3/16 or about, maybe it's 11 gauge. That should be plenty for this because this material is like a little bit less than 11 gauge or 1/8 inch material, and it's pretty uniform and square to where I can pull measurements off of out here and out here to an even point in a couple of different spots to make sure that it's going to be cut straight across. Well, that's a bummer. My GoPro shut off on me right as I was about to start grinding. But anyways, I'll show you here. I just basically cleaned up all of the old paint and stuff off of there just so I can get better marks on here. I'll just use a Sharpie, and then it'll be better for welding as well. So what we're gonna do to start off, we'll just kind of have it sitting here. It sits pretty good on the back, but to actually put it together, I'm probably gonna end up like pushing it down, because right now it kind of sits up off of the table a little bit. So when I get it tacked back together, I'm gonna push it just down. So then it's points back there touching, and then points up here, so that I know it's going back together evenly, hopefully. We'll take some measurements real quick and get it all written down so that I can copy it over to the passenger side. I'm gonna get all of this set up to where it's ready to weld and tack it together really well. And then I'm just gonna bolt it into the car just to be able to take a couple measurements and see that it's actually enough of a space to come out, because I have to move it at least a 1/2 inch out on top, which I have room to move in the axle and the joint in there. So as long as I get a 1/2 inch spacer in here, I think it should be good. And then if it compresses under load, it's only going a 1/4 inch in, or like 1/2 degree of camber. So that should be pretty good. I feel like I'd be okay with that. What I'm gonna do is basically go bolt hole here to bolt hole, so that I have a measurement. Got 9 inches. No, I just wrote on the whiteboard with Sharpie. Rookie mistake. I got it off though. I did it quick enough. Because we're working on the control arm right now, I'm just gonna make some more room here. I'll take the whiteboard marker this time. So center to center. So if we draw a little wishbone here, just so we can have reference points, 9 inches. And this is gonna be driver's side. I think it'll probably be the same measurements on the passenger side, but we'll still take some measurements just to make sure. Yeah, it's 9 inches square, so that's good. You should always take a before and after, and then I can match it when I get the other side on. That'll also help me keep it square. Not that I have a little bit of a pitch or an angle, then I'm gonna end up fighting it going back onto the knuckle, and I don't want to do that. If it doesn't go on smooth, something's wrong, and don't try and force it. Most of the time it ends up breaking or wrecking things worse. We're gonna take a measurement, because now we know we can pull square off both sides of this back or inside bushing, come in as a square measurement. So we'll pull off of here. This will be a little tricky to see or do here. Center, we'll just go 6 inches to this. Yeah, this is really tricky with this tape to try and hold that. So it might not make sense to you guys, but it makes sense in my brain. So as long as I'm doing it the same on both sides, it should be fine. This is the original measurements from bolt hole to bolt hole, both ways, and it should be 6 inches from the inner bushing, and then 3 5/8 from the outer bolt hole to where those notch marks are as well. And there it is. No going back now. But basically, just mocking this up here, I'm gonna need to put like a 1/2 inch gap here. So it's gonna look something like that. And I gotta put plate in there and then take measurements. Now we gotta cut a piece of plate or something to go in there. I just set up a quick little test piece just to make sure I got the welder set up before I go and weld this. I don't want this to come apart or crack or anything like that, so I want the parameters set pretty good. I'll give you a quick look here. I don't know if you can see that. So this is the passenger side. I didn't change that at all. It looks fairly straight. And then you go to the side that I modified. It's gonna be hard to see. I mean, that's a lot of positive camber there. A lot more than I thought. I just have everything finger tight right now. I already jumped on the back a little too. So I think I'll have to take it back off and probably only go with a 1/2 inch spacer, not 3/4 of an inch, because that's quite a bit. I don't want to wear off the outside of the tire now when I'm not really drifting or anything. So I mean, and then also with it that much positive camber, I'm going to end up hitting the lip here, especially when under load. It's going to rub on the tire. I'm almost wondering if I got to go only a 1/4 inch of a space on that. 3/4 of an inch was a little bit too much. I kind of got ahead of myself on that. I should have tried something less first, but that's okay. So after test fitting it in there, it is way too much of positive camber now. I figured I could go a little bit extra, but I went a little too much extra. So what we're gonna do now is just remove one of those spacers and test it, because that will move at 1/4 of an inch. It might still be a little too much, but that's why we just move it and test it and not weld it solid yet. So yeah, just gonna get this thing cut off real quick. Just cut the outside and that first outer spacer off of there, and then tack the outside back on. I'm trying to get the car to squat again so I can get some measurements with this 1/2 inch spacer, because it looks like it could possibly work, but rather than stacking all kinds of stuff on top of the trunk, I went upstairs and just grabbed all my dumbbells. So there's 30s, 20s, and some 15s. So I think that's like 130 pounds sitting in the trunk, rather than a ton of tires and stuff. I'll still put the mounted wheels on there because that's added like 20, 30 pounds. But yeah, it'll be a little less in the trunk, but I'll still stack the tires on it. I got all the mounted tires and then a couple of loose tires on top as well. And I sat on it, jumped around on it a little bit, so I got it to squat. So there's like a 1/2 inch of room between the tire and the lip of the fender, which I'll probably have to roll this fender up at the top at least. When you measure it out here, which is pretty hard to see, but if you measure out the top here and the bottom down here, which I don't know if I'm even showing that real well. So when you put it square on the ground and it's touching the fender, you just take a measurement for comparison off of here. That's how I'm kind of getting my measurements anyways. So I have maybe 3/16 up here, and okay, it's not cooperating with me now because I gotta make sure it's all straight. This is just giving me kind of rough measurements too. It's not like ideal. Now it looks like it's squatted a little more, so I got like 1/8 of an inch up top and 1/4 on the bottom. So right now I'm actually positive 1/8 of an inch when it's squatted, which I don't want it to really be positive when it's under load. You want it as close to 0 as you can. Otherwise a little bit more towards negative is a little bit better, I think, just because I don't want to mess this fender up a bunch. I don't want to cause any issues at the track. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to lift it back up, take it off because it's all just tacked, and take another one of those 1/4 inch spacers out, so it's only spaced out 1/4 of an inch. And that's where I'm going to go with it. I'm not even going to test fit it. I'm just going to weld in that 1/4 inch. Any more than that's just going to be a little too much. And I still want to be able to drive this on the street. So if I have positive camber on the street, it's not going to be good. All right, so it doesn't look super great because it's still wet, but I just hit it with some black primer just to cover up some of the bare metal. I'll let that dry and basically bake on because it was still fairly hot. I'll set that off to the side. I'll pull out the passenger side rear, do all the measurements, get that cut and put that spacer in there as well. And by the time I do that, this one should just about be ready to be put back into the car. And then we'll get it back on the ground and do a bunch of after measurements to compare what we have on the board. Now the passenger side control arm is out. We're gonna just do basically the same process as we did on the driver's side. Double check the measurements, make sure it does actually match the driver's side, which I would assume it does. But we're gonna start off with grinding off this whole area where we're gonna be marking it. And then after we get it marked, we'll get it cut, throw in 1 1/4 inch spacer, and then we can burn it right away. We don't have to waste the time test fitting it because it already works on the driver's side. So yeah, we'll get to that in just a second. I will grind this real quick and then I'll check back in. We're just gonna use this, well, no, we'll grab a fresh one, and we're gonna tack this piece right on and just keep on moving with it. And hopefully you can kind of see what I'm doing in here. It's pretty bad lighting. It's a small garage, but we're gonna get the driver's side bolted back in and ready to go while the other one cools and dries. Now what I'm gonna do is probably gonna make a lot of you cringe a little bit. I don't have my Fender roller. I borrowed it to a buddy, but it doesn't really work on this car anyways. It's meant for larger cars. I need something that's smaller for this, so I'm gonna give this a little bit of a love tap up here and get that lip bent over a touch. It's not like cracking it, but you can see it's stretching the paint just a little bit, but we'll probably just go with that. So that it's at least like kind of pinched up a little bit. It's not flat by any means, but it's more of a upward slant. So hopefully the tire doesn't rub on it quite so bad when it does squat, because now I'm adding some positive camber or getting it closer to 0. I run the risk of rubbing that on the tire, and I don't want to cut the tire with this lip up in here. Okay, so I got this all set back on the ground, got it pressed up to the fender because it just touches the top of the fender. We'll pull a couple measurements real quick. So I got up on the top of the tire 1/4 inch and the bottom 1/4 inch. So right now, empty, it's 0. I took all of the camber out of it, so it's right 0. So if we want to look at the after, empty, we're gonna say 0 to 1/8 inch. Hold on, just so that's not confused, because that looks confusing there. 0 and plus 1/8 of an inch. Yes, I know, it kind of doesn't make sense, but then again it does, because comparing what we had before, where it was a half negative and then negative 3/4, from going negative a half an inch on top to the bottom of the tire to 0, now it's even and square, straight up and down, rather than before it was like turned at an angle. Now it is zeroed out. That was my goal. Goal was 0 right here. I'll circle the 0. We met our goal and then exceeded it just a tiny bit. So once it squats, you should potentially see a 1/4 inch difference here. We're gonna load the car with a bunch of weight and then hopefully see that same difference where it would be like a negative eighth of an inch, which in relative terms, is that like a 1/4 of a degree, half a degree of negative camber? Who knows? I'm not on an alignment rack, so I can't tell you the exact numbers. Eventually I'll get it on a rack again and see where it's at. Hopefully before I go and get like upgraded upper and lower control arms in the back, just so we have an idea of like, this is where I got it without spending any money, right? That's the whole goal. Don't spend anything. Before I do a loaded measurement, because I'll do all the loaded measurements together, I had 1/8 inch toe in the front, empty, with it being that far off, and now I have them both at 0. So I'm gonna check my toe real quick and I'll write that down as well. I didn't show it because it's really hard to hold the plates and both tape measures and try and have a camera on it. But empty, as of right now, I have 3/16 of an inch toe in. So I gained a 16th. The 16th doesn't seem like much, but it's gonna help in the long run. Be more close to what our goal was of just like trying to make this car as fast as we can without spending any money. I want to get as much out of this car as I can, especially for this last event of the season. I need to push this thing hard. People were already saying, man, your car is super fast, it's a rocket ship. This was going to make it even faster. And who knew you could make a Miata even faster with stock components in the rear. All right, after getting it loaded down, all the weight's in the trunk, bunch of tires on the back and everything, like jumping on it so it can settle. After we got it loaded, we have it at 1/8 of an inch toe in. So it toes out just a tiny bit. We'll probably go and take it for just a little test drive. We won't really feel a whole lot of difference on the street. We won't know how it's gonna perform until we get to the track. So yeah, we're gonna wrap things up real quick and then take you out for a quick test drive. So far it feels kind of like it did before. There's not really any noticeable difference. I think I said like probably won't notice a whole lot of a difference until we get to the track. And we can actually throw down some laps in it. For sure won't see a difference in the tires until we're able to run a set of tires, or at least get partially through a set, just to kind of see what the tire wear is going to be like. So the only real noticeable thing so far, just driving and making turns and stuff, my one CD axle in the back isn't making quite as much noise as it has been. So it's not like every time I would, do like a little weeble wobble on the road, it would make a popping noise, and it's not doing that anymore. So that might actually be a good thing, because I was able to like stretch the axles out just a little bit, but I'm not putting quite as much like compression and stress on the axles. It's able to kind of open them up a little bit. I almost forgot to give you a little bit of an update with the handbrake too, since I welded it and pounded it back straight. It feels so much better, nice and tight. It's not squishy feeling like it was. Night and day difference with the handbrake. We're back from our test cruise. The car feels great. We're all ready and everything is all set to go for Drifting the Plains 4, the final points event of Drifting the Plains. Shouldn't be anything else we have to do to the car. It's driving good, the alignment feels good. All I gotta do is maybe swap out some tires, but I have a few mounted ready to go. So yeah, next thing to do would just be load it up and head to the track. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.